age of technology and advancement at the Williamtown base. This man, about to be taken for a fly in the Hornet, is the new Chief of Operational RAAF Bases in Australia, Air Vice Marshal Ted Bradford. It's part of his 2-day visit of inspection to Williamtown. He takes over from the retired Air Vice Marshal Reynolds. Air Vice Marshal Radford's previous post was on the ground as Chief of Air Force Personnel in Canberra, but he's no stranger to the Hunter region.
I was here at primary school at Nelson Bay and then high school at Newcastle Technical High School, and then of course I ran the fighter project for 2.5 years, 1980-81, when the big important decision was made.
Now, obviously you haven't been flying all the time in your career in the Air Force. Would it be fair to say you're slightly nervous?
Yes, I would say so. I haven't flown since really 1978.
Who would blame anyone but the highly trained Hornet pilot himself from feeling a little anxious taking to the skies in this sort of weapon? But no more will the students of the base's parachute school feel the nerves and excitement of learning to parachute jump. This week is the last phase of the school moving down to Nowra. The old, reliable towers and poles are lying idle, awaiting demolition or removal. Parachute training began at Williamtown in 1951, became the Army's full responsibility in 1974. It's trained more than 8,500 paratroopers and saw more than 200,000 successful descents. The school established a reputation of excellence second to none. Now it's all over.
As I see the empty buildings around us now and look at the training towers starting to come down, and I pack up my boxes in the office, there's a lot of nostalgia. I've been coming here for 22 years and I'm very sorry to leave.
Yes, and it's this building which was one of the real hives of activity over all those years. This is where that enviable safety record of 204,000 jumps without a casualty began. This is where the chutes were packed. Now the 6 tables are empty, and this building will be the first victim of the bulldozer in a very short space of time. But Williamtown and the surrounding area will never forget the boys that used to jump out of those planes in those chutes.
With most of the big names already here in the city, well-known Australian and international surfing identities are commonplace along the promenade. And of course, as with all major surfing tournaments, good weather brought the attractive element out in force. While the competition for attention on the beach continued, out in the water things were just as hot. In the hardest heat of today's round 2, Newcastle's Nicky Wood in the yellow met world junior amateur champion Damien Hardman. Wood was out-surfed, but his second placing ensured that both surfers made it into round 3.
The National Safety Council organised the diploma course in safety management to assist people working in the field of occupational safety. At last night's graduation dinner, 30 people from local government bodies, heavy industry, nursing, manufacturing industries and the business sector received their awards. The 36-week course conducted at the Newcastle College of Advanced Education covered all aspects of occupational health and safety, including workers' compensation and insurance, accident control in the workplace and civil liability. Such was the success of the course, the regional branch of the Safety Council of Australia will run the diploma course once again early next year. The Wallaroo dump site proposal has generated intense public debate since it was announced 2 years ago. It was subject to a public inquiry in March, where despite the concerns voiced by residents and oyster farmers, a recommendation was made in favour of the dump with many stringent requirements. The Minister received that report in May, but now, after much delay and intense public pressure, he has rejected the report's recommendation. Mr Carr said he had asked his department to seek further information from the Tomago Aluminium Company in relation to their proposed solid waste disposal site at Wallaroo. In addition, the Minister has asked the department to work with the company in finding a satisfactory alternative site in a less environmentally sensitive location. Meanwhile, the Tomago aluminium smelter has reacted angrily to the decision.
Frankly, we're very dismayed at the decision.
For it contemplates a rezoning.
The Commission of Inquiry, which was held in March of this year, recommended conditional approval be given to our proposal, and that approval covered fluorinated wastes, which we are currently storing on site, and those fluorinated wastes are not considered hazardous anywhere in the world. It's been a very long and a very costly process for Tomago, and naturally we're very dismayed at the decision and the deferment.
A view to a kill is everything we have come to expect from Bond movies. Roger Moore fights an evil genius intent on world domination, in this case played by Christopher Walken. Along the way, Bond, as usual, meets lots of lovely ladies, and the loveliest is Tanya Roberts. New York-born Tanya is in Australia to promote the movie, and when I met her in Newcastle today, I asked her how hard was it to get the coveted role of Bond's leading lady.
Actually, they offered me the part, so I never knew about that. I'm sure they screen tested a lot of women, but, you know, I wasn't privy to that. They just offered me the part, and I said as long as she's integral to the role or not just, you know, a pretty thing hanging on his arm, yeah, I'd love to do it. And I thought that the part was pretty integral to the part. For example, she's a geologist, and a lot of the movie takes place in a mine, and she's sort of explaining to James some things that he doesn't know about the mine, and you know, in that way. And other aspects of her character were a little different, a little bit more multifaceted, maybe than.
So you're not just a pretty blonde?
No, no.
What's this loaded with?
Rock salt.
Now you tell me.
For 24-year-old Jenny Hughes, the week-long seminar in December will be a highlight in her sporting career.
Your
A
selection
strong
to
player
the
in the
academy.
Australian university team, Jenny says that there'll be a lot to learn about Olympic sports at the conference.
Well, for the bulk of the week, we'll be sitting in on presentations given by Olympic scholars and athletes, but we also have group discussions, physical activities and excursions throughout the Institute of Sport.
And why were you chosen to attend?
Well, a few reasons. Of course, they're after people with sporting backgrounds, of which basketball is mine. I'm also a staff member of the university and a student, and applications were invited from tertiary institutions. Other than that, I'm Vice President of the University Sports Union, I'm Secretary of the University Basketball Club, and I'm an Australian University representative in basketball.
What will you gain from your selection to the academy?
Besides the personal satisfaction, I think my sporting interests will benefit greatly, and I'll be able to spread the word not only throughout the university but throughout Newcastle and hopefully the state.
Right.
Many motorists who thought they'd get a free run at the parking meters were sadly mistaken today. For although the parking patrol officers were on strike, their colleagues, the Police Highway Patrol and the General Duties officers, took up where they left off. The parking officers want permanent status enjoyed by fellow Public Service Association members doing similar jobs. They intend to work the rule until early next week, when the PSA will meet Police Minister Anderson to discuss the dispute. If those talks fail, the officers intend to strike again in 3 weeks' time.
Smoky Dawson's early radio days, he was closely associated with the Australian company Kellogg's. It was through this association that a remarkable reunion took place in Newcastle today. In 1956, Kellogg's and the Smoky Dawson radio show held a national competition. Draw a cartoon and depicting one of the programs, you could win a ticket to the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in Melbourne. A young, unknown 14-year-old boy was talked into entering by his father. He won and received a letter congratulating him from Smoky Dawson. Today, the two met face to face for the first time. The unknown boy, now the well-known Mike Leyland of the Leyland brothers, who had kept the letter, photo and ticket to the opening ceremony 29 years ago today.
I got that out this morning.
But for Smoky Dawson, life has not been easy. He ran away from an orphanage in which he was placed, deciding to make it on his own. He's done just that, but the early scars have never quite healed. He says he had to write this book, not only to heal those scars, but to help today's youth as well.
But I felt it was time that I had a message for children in that dark tunnel of life that a lot of them are in now with drugs and blaming it on to a separation or broken marriages. And I want to prove that you can get out of that. You should be stronger for it, really. But you can't always do it on your own. You've got to have special people. And that was the reason of writing the book, because in this I had something like 800 or 900 names in the book that I felt were worthy of mention, because here I was going through my life. I was having this terrible trauma, running from fear, and I really mean fear. There was never a day without butterflies in my tummy. And to suddenly find out there were some beautiful people in the world, and through them I was able to make it.
The occasion that brought the Premier to Woy Woy was the opening of the new aged persons hostel and hydrotherapy pool at the district hospital. Mr Rand spoke in front of a large audience, including nurses from the Pete Island Retardation Hospital, protesting about what they see as a lack of services on the Central Coast for developmentally disabled children. Both retardation and general nurses have consistently criticised the lack of staff and money in the state's health system, and today Mr Rand did his best to appease them.
I think the nurses have to get a different deal, a better deal. And we have plans which we are developing and which we hope to have implemented in the very near future, which will change the face of nursing, give nurses greater incentive, greater rewards and greater recognition for the sterling service they perform for their patients and the people generally.
The plaque unveiled, Mr Rand attempted to leave politics behind for a while and went to inspect the new facilities. The hostel was built under the Community Employment Program at a cost of $1.2 million, with the help of state and federal grants. It comprises 43 single-bed units for aged people, needing frequent access to hospital care. A further $250,000 has been spent installing a hydrotherapy pool nearby for rehabilitation unit patients. During his tour of the extensions, Premier Rand was confronted again by protesters, most of them parents of retarded children. Spokeswoman Lynn Thompson says the government is not doing enough for the retarded.
We need trained staff, 24-hour trained staff, and living in a cottage just doesn't, our children, don't get any benefit out of that. They need, they just need, it just doesn't work.
Premier Rand promised he would investigate the parents' complaints.
If the weather at Newcastle Beach all week hadn't been the best, then today was the day to make up for all that. The crowd, they came in droves. The beach was one mass of people. There were also people watching from vantage points on the cliff around the beach. If it wasn't all happening on the beach, then it was certainly hot in the water. From the quarter-finals first thing this morning, the big guns were out there playing their shots. When it got to the semis, two world champions, Tom Carroll and Sean Thompson, were still there, along with young hotshots, Californian Tom Curran and Sydney's 19-year-old raging bull, Mark Okolupo. Carroll was knocked out by Thompson, and the explosive Tom Curran outmanoeuvred Okolupo for a place in the big one. Badly wanting a win to end a recent minor slump, the 29-year-old South African Sean Thompson was carving it up in the final in typical smooth and steady style.
And he's got it. This is a great looking wave. Sean's dropping down, waiting for the moment, slams it off the top, vertical re-entry.
But Curran, who looks set to take out the world champion crown this year, was showing off his recent hot form.
Tom's making a big comeback here. He's had two really strong rides in a...
When the judge's decision came, it was Curran who walked away with surfing's richest purse, $15,000 and a car. The Californian was full of praise for Newcastle's inaugural international surfing event.
It's such a great pleasure to be in this contest, let alone to win. And this is one of the greatest moments of my life. It's easily one of the greatest contests I've ever been in.
Earlier in the day, South Africa's Wendy Botha defeated Pam Burridge in the women's final, and in the Coke Surf Trials, Dave McCauley took home the cheque.
Plenty of power in it, and she's riding it quite well. She is. She's working hard now to try and stay with that wave.
When Californian Tom Curran cut and carved his way to victory in the BHP Steel International, defeating South African Sean Thompson, he picked up a cheque for $15,000, a trophy, and inside it, the keys to a new four-wheel drive vehicle. The prize money, which totalled $100,000, and the huge crowds contributed to making Surffest such an outstanding success. And the spectators weren't forgotten. The ultimate prize for a dedicated surfer, a board autographed by the world's best, was raffled during the week. 7,000 spectators bought tickets. The raffle was drawn yesterday afternoon. The winner, Ray Milligan from Bluff Point at Budgie today picked up his prize from the NBN studios. The chairman of the Surffest Executive Committee, Graham Gallagher, presented the board to Ray, who couldn't believe his luck.
Oh, it's great. Just couldn't believe it. It's fantastic.
Now it's a collector's item. Will you be using it?
Yeah, I think I will, but I'll be out for office.
Meanwhile, the success of Surffest and its contribution to the city of Newcastle was highlighted in the media locally and throughout New South Wales today. In the wake of its success, the future of Surffest is also being considered. A meeting between the sponsors and the Executive Committee has been called in 2 weeks' time to review Surffest 1985 and the BHP Steel International. A decision on whether the event will be held again next year will not be announced until after that meeting.
Councillor Taylor says the Shire Clerk's main mistake with the Salamander project was that he tried to do too much himself.
It's a decision that each and every councillor themselves have got to make. They've got to sum up the situation as they see it. The report is a fairly lengthy one, and obviously I've mentioned this to the councillors that I don't think they should form an opinion on one reading of the report, because it goes into so much depth that I think you've got to read it really the second time to get the impact that's there. But I think that in the light of the things that they must consider in the Shire Clerk's case, and it's spelled out here in the report, that when they judge whether he be retained or not, that Salamander is part of his duties and part of his responsibilities only, and that any assessment they make of his ability should be taken in the light of his performance over the 4 or 5 years in which he's been the Shire Clerk.
A public meeting will be held here at Nelson Bay on Thursday night to discuss the report. But as the dust starts to settle over Salamander, the council appears to be facing another storm, this time over a swimming pool. The residents of the Tomaree Peninsula have been working for 13 years to get a pool at Nelson Bay. They've raised $100,000 for the $840,000 estimated cost of the 50-metre pool. But a report is going before council from the Shire engineer tomorrow night, recommending that the council build a 25-metre heated pool with a long-term view to provide a leisure centre. But according to the residents, that isn't what they want, and they haven't been consulted.
You think the councillors will find in your favour tomorrow night, because that's when the decision is going to be made?
Well, if they spend the time to talk to the public, we believe there's no reason why they shouldn't. But they haven't been talking to to us or the public, the councillors. So I think that they really don't know what's happening in the area.